Hey everyone, and welcome to part two of our SummerSlam 1992 review. Wax, it was such a big event that we couldn't fit it into one show, so we split it into two parts and really going into the business end. But how have you been feeling since we had our part one, which was a few days ago?
Excited to get to part two, Fash, because this is the big part of the event. Two big main event matches, three maybe, if you count the middle one that we're going to talk about. But big characters on this show, big memories for us. That's why we had to split this up into two.
Yeah, and it's great reminiscing about all those moments, watching them again. But yeah, I think we're at the business end, as I say, because I think these are the moments now that are the most memorable of this event. Certainly, as we go into the last three matches, but there's two particular ones, and we'll be kicking it off with the big one, the WWF title match. And Wax, before we get there and we do our little VT, I just want to say that I now have been the world podcasting champion for 8 months. Actually, a little bit over 8 months. So it's probably the longest reign in the history of the World Podcasting Federation. And you've tried to challenge me across the world, the globe, but I've still got the gold. So the challenge is there. Am I going to hit a year? Am I going to be champion as long as I want to be? I think so. I think I'm going to hold this title until I feel like holding it. So the champ is here. The gold is here. So let's talk about the match in 1992 between the Ultimate Warrior, the Macho Man, championship gold. I know all about it. You don't, but let's talk about the match.
Okay, Fash, so here it is, the big match, Macho Man versus Ultimate Warrior. Macho Man obviously is the champion. We thought coming into this, it would be Ric Flair versus Macho Man, but actually Mr. Perfect and Ric Flair are playing somewhat of a sideshow to this whole match, which is the most interesting element of this. We don't know which corner Mr. Perfect and Ric Flair are going to end up on. Just before the match kicks off, it's probably one of the first pay-per-views that there's been a sort of full recap of an angle before a big match. And we'll know from here on onwards, that is actually a really big part of the pay-per-view presentation. And I think something WWF, WWE has always done really well is those big match build-ups.
Absolutely.
Build-ups to the big events. But Warrior comes out first. He gets a really strong reaction from the crowd, as you would expect. And a similarly big cheer for the Macho Man. But I thought during the match that changed a little bit, and the fans very much had their favourite.
And who would you say that favorite was?
During the match, certainly it was the Ultimate Warrior.
I felt that as well. I mean, even coming out, like say, because it was an arena show, I was trying to gauge, because you remember things, but it was difficult to tell just because it is a bit of a cauldron. But I felt Warrior shaded it. But when it got to the match, absolutely, you could hear some boos, and Warrior was definitely a man. I know, as you know, I was a big Warrior fan there. But Wax, one thing I want to say before we get into the match was, even back at this age, I was a traditionalist because I remember being really confused as to why this match was placed where it was. So I think I had been conditioned in the year that I'd been watching wrestling that the WWF title match goes on last. And this to me was the two biggest stars, right? So I could not understand, even though it was obvious what they were trying to do with the British Bulldog, the hometown hero in the main event. I really didn't like this at the time, I remember, and thought it was a bit of an anticlimax that this big match was taking place where it was. Do you recall anything like that? Thinking, because it was the first time, right, that the title match wasn't essentially the big main event last match on the card.
Yeah, it's actually been a bad year for the World Championship at WrestleMania as well.
Actually, right.
Macho Man had a mid-tier main event match, and obviously Hulk Hogan was the...
But that was still double main event, right? That was presented. I mean, outside of the shows, I don't think any point in the build-up to this, and we've ran through it, did they say that Bret Hart and British Bulldog is a main event. We saw it at the time, even as an Intercontinental Title match. Yes, the Bulldog's there. Whereas, the main event was very much Warrior against Savage. So I just thought at the time it was weird. And even now,
explained the reasoning behind it. It was just sort of assumed that it's because it's a British hero, the Bulldog coming out.
There's another theory as well. I think the theory definitely was the Bulldog, but I think there might have been a second one. But we'll dig into that as we go through the match.
Yep. As the two competitors are coming to the ring, Vince McMahon asks where Mr. Perfect is, assuming Bobby Heenan would know. Heenan says he's been kept out of the loop on purpose in this one. Which is interesting considering all three spent quite a lot of time together over the past 6 months or so. At the start of the match, before the match even starts, Macho Man offers his hand to the Ultimate Warrior, who eventually takes it, but kind of leads to a stare off, and that's what starts the sort of pushing and shoving.
This was great. This had a big time feel, right? I was just looking at them, the circling each other, the handshake, the tug, the crowd was into it. This felt like a proper big time match.
Yeah, great outfits as well. Ultimate Warrior's wearing this sort of inside of your body type outfit, showing all his the inner muscles, and Macho Man with his bright yellow and pink, something that we're probably quite used to seeing Macho Man in. But yeah, you're right. It's two of the main eventers at this point. I don't think you could name a third that would come in here. Maybe Undertaker potentially,
Yeah, it
but I
was
think
fun,
he was
but
still on the
yeah,
rise.
yeah.
Are still some way away from the top, but I think you would say Macho Man and Warrior were definitely your top two talents in the WWF at this time.
Yeah, definitely top two baby faces, and then you like say then it's the Undertaker, and this is it. It's the clash between two baby faces. The first time, as you said, WrestleMania 7, it was heel against face. Here, as we say, that the intrigue was also how the crowd would react. And I thought, in terms of good pace, Macho Man, as you'd imagine, set the pace here, and it's pretty frenetic, in terms of frenetic, I should say, as they went going. And Warrior, I think, in the early stages did his part. There's a couple of bits where I thought, he was a little bit maybe stiffer than he should be. But I thought, it was a really good beginning as well. They really started it off well, from a psychology point of view, but also, the kind of pace that was being set very early.
And I think what's great about Macho Man is, he can lead a match and he can, work off the audience. So when he starts getting a few boos and cheers when he's attacking the Warrior, he starts almost, playing out like a heel character in the ring. Some of the move sets that he does, Warrior catches Macho Man off the top rope in really impressive fashion. I thought that was really well done. I think Warrior goes through a phase where he just does Irish whip after Irish whip with a few punches in between.
He loves a clothesline, doesn't he, the Warrior?
But Vince McMahon was really into it on commentary. He was really big in this matchup. And it's probably about 15 minutes into the match when.
And it's 15 minutes, and people think the Warrior can't have long matches, but with Savage, with Rick Rude, he went there, and this was good, but like, carry on. I just want to make the point that this wasn't a short.
Minutes, you weren't sitting there thinking, when is this going to be over?
Yeah,
this is a really good match, similar to the WrestleMania match they had about 18 months before this. And you're right, if you put somebody in there with the Warrior who knows how to lead a match, a really strong performer in the Macho Man, Rick Rude, he can have a really good match. He's got the talent, there to do what he needs to do.
And you know what I always love about him, and I think Hogan, Warrior, and Savage, these three, they're great at selling. So, the Warrior, people talk, he's got a good talent over, but he is a great seller of offense, and we've talked about that over time. Randy Savage, obviously, just a great worker, but Warrior was really reacting well to everything, and that's what created the jeopardy. And obviously, as all this is going on, the back and forth, we're still not seeing Mr. Perfect or Ric Flair.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, about 15 minutes into the match, both Perfect and Flair come to the ringside. The first sort of involvement is Mr. Perfect trips the Macho Man, and that straight away that's you thinking, has the Warrior sold out? Incredible. And the crowd thinks so too, I think, because suddenly the vibe changes a little bit and the Warrior starts getting a few jeers from the crowd, almost as if they're sensing the same thing, that he's sold out.
It's like the air came out of the arena, wasn't it? So it looks his booze, but it's more this kind of shock
that it could be the Warrior. There's a ref bump shortly after, and the Warrior has Macho Man pinned, but no, Macho Man escapes, I think, after a really long attempt. And there's a second ref bump. This time Macho Man has him pinned. And again, it's really great the way they're building the story here.
Yeah.
Each man has the other one dead to rights, but there's no ref to back it up. And this time it's Perfect grabs Warrior, and Flair uses the sort of fake knuckles to punch Warrior. And now you're thinking the brass knuckles, and you're thinking this has to be the Macho Man who sold out to Flair and Perfect. Obviously, if you're a little bit older than we were at the time, you know exactly what's happening. You know what's.
I'll be honest, right? I'm going to big myself up. I think as an 8-year-old, I'd at this point, I thought I'm going back to say 1992, and I thought, you know what, Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect have ruined this main event, and they were lying throughout. But maybe I wasn't. But yeah, I was still at the time hoping it's Macho and it's not Warrior that turned you.
Yeah, backing up what's happening in the ring, Bobby Heenan's actually really good on commentary. He's just changing like the wind, as to who's sold out. First, like Macho Man sold out, and he goes Warrior sold out. He's really good in the way he sells it to those watching at home. Warrior breaks a pin off the flying elbow. It's a really slow count by the referee.
I was
one of the first times. Probably you've seen a flying elbow off the top that's not led to a pin.
Well, well,
one of
well.
the one of
Warrior's the only
save
one
the
that does
first.
it. WrestleMania 7. I think Warrior's the only one, and Hogan, of course, that have done that. But certainly babyface Macho Man typically gets the win when he goes for the big elbow.
Yeah, we're really at the sort of crux of the match now, and this Warriors hit by the chair from Flair.
And
And
that's the moment, isn't it?
yeah, and I think it's outside the ring, and Macho Man sort of catches onto the plan at this point. He knows, he hesitates. I think what happens is Warriors on the floor.
Yep.
Macho Man gets up, sees him on the floor. He knows he didn't put him on the floor.
Yep.
He's going to go up to the top ring for another elbow, but then
Top
decides,
rope, yeah.
Ric Flair's standing right next to him, right? So he goes, no, this is not right. So he does a sort of double axe hammer blow on Flair, and that's when we know the baby faces are sort of uniting to get rid of Flair and Perfect.
Well, that was the big moment, wasn't it? And I apologize. I mean, we're recording quite late here, so you're probably noticing Wax is butchering all the names of the moves, but we'll let him off. He's got a young baby and he's been out all day, so he's shooting here. But you're right. I mean, it's that moment because the old Macho Man, the bad Macho Man, he would have taken advantage of it, right? But it's great, as you say, Warriors in the ascendancy, and he's been attacked. So Macho Man gets up knowing that it's not him that's caused it. And there's that moment when he's on the top rope, and then he delivers the axe handle to Ric Flair,
and he gets a chair to the knee from Flair. And at this point where Warrior was previously dazed, gets a chair of his own and sort of runs off Mr. Perfect and Ric Flair to the back.
Well, there's a count out first, isn't it? So there's obviously what happens is Warrior's in the ring. The Macho Man's been hit with the chair because he's went and attacked them, and he gets counted out. So that kind of takes the air out of the building, and it's announced that the Warrior is the winner, but the title can't change hands on a count out. And as you say, he then takes the chair and he chases the heels away while the Macho Man is on the ground, essentially selling the chair shot and the treachery of Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect.
And for all of those that love a happy ending, Warrior makes his way back towards the ring, grabs the belt, hands it over to Macho Man, and they sort of, hug and celebrate in the ring together. Macho Man really selling that knee injury.
Yeah, because it's the title again, isn't it? It's that moment that we always love in wrestling. Warrior's got the championship. What's he going to do? Is he going to whack the Macho Man with it? But if you look back to it, Wax, leading into this, there was a lot of bad blood, a lot of mistrust. What's going to happen? But actually, Warrior being the good guy, he hands over the title to the Macho Man, lifts his arm, and yes, very much they are together now, and they've got two guys to deal with, and then that's, as you say, that happy ending. But in terms of a few questions for you, because we've kind of fast forward and talking about the match, because really we like to talk about the match, but not move for move. What was your views? Compare this to the WrestleMania 7 match. What did you prefer? What do you think was better? And then any other general thoughts? And then maybe I can hit you with some of the backstage stuff or rumors that have kind of continued to this day.
Yeah, I mean, I would put the WrestleMania match above this just because of the stakes.
Yeah,
that were that wasn't necessarily just a world title match. Back then, it was a retirement match for the Macho Man, and I thought that really added to it. And then the ending, obviously, there wasn't this whole sort of mess with Flair and Perfect involved, which I thought really added to this match. It didn't take away from it. We knew we were going to get something along those lines, and I wasn't really disappointed when they got involved. But I thought, again, Macho Man, Warrior, they worked really well together. And the great thing that comes out of this is the Ultimate Maniacs are born.
Oh, my favorite combo. But as we know, it's going to be a sad end to that. But as you say, for that short period, and we'll talk about it next. I can't wait talking about its next phase up to Survivor Series. It was a great combination. The look, the promos, everything about it is wrestling at its best. It's even in our opening. If you obviously watch the opening of this show, we've got a clip from them being that tandem. But the thing is, Wax, I still remember at the time being very disappointed that Warrior wasn't the champion, because I say I was a big Warrior mark here. That disappointed me. But as a match, I'd agree with you. I think the WrestleMania 7 match is superior to this, just in terms of the story of the match and the delivery. But I thought this was still very good. I remember enjoying it then. I remember enjoying it when I watched it some years after. And now rewatching it, I still thought it was a great match between the two. Really epic, big time. Once again, we keep talking about the crowd adds to it. I loved it that, now we've got Nightfall here.
Yeah,
Wembley Stadium. So we start off, it's daytime and now and it was just a shame about the ending, but I thought a great match. But there was a few rumors that people still talk about, Wax, in relation to this match.
Let me ask you a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Why was Warrior not the champion again at this point?
Well, do you know what? Let's go one step, because we know what happens after this, right? There's an interview with Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect where they talk about, now they're going to move on to, is it Plan B, they call it? That was Plan A. And I think that moment, they call it the Warrior specifically. So I think at this moment in time, when we don't know what's going to happen next, I think the plan was Warrior versus Ric Flair, right? I think what we're going to see in a few days, and we'll talk about it, Ric Flair becoming the champion again. I think that's what they're setting up, and Warrior would have won it, say Royal Rumble, and taken it further. But yeah, it's to your point. Why not? I think Macho Man probably still deserved to be champion, given he'd been a loyal, wrestler in the company. Warrior, maybe Vince wasn't 100% sure if he needs him to be champion. Can he trust him as champion? And your yeah, exactly, and your audio was going a bit there, Wax, but and I think it was probably just the story he was playing out. He doesn't want this babyface to be that babyface. Is more Macho will lose the title, and I think the leg injury, the knee injury is going to be a big part of that. And I think the ultimate plan at this point, no pun intended, was Ric Flair against the Ultimate Warrior, and I think the Warrior would have been champion in that alternative reality. But obviously, there's lots that's going to happen in the coming weeks and months, which is going to change maybe that trajectory. But another thing, Wax, there's another rumor that has existed till today, and I've never seen any official confirm it, but it's something that's been folklore, and people actually say that Warrior was going to win the title here. So our theory about trust rewarding the Macho Man doesn't work, because the theory is that the Warrior was going to be the one that turned heel. So he was going to join up with Mr. Perfect and Ric Flair. That's the reason the match wasn't last, irrespective of the British Bulldog point of view. And Warrior would have left here as the heel champion, shocking the world. Now, I think that's really fun to consider. And like I said, nobody I've seen officially confirm this, but the talk at the time was that Warrior pulled out last minute, saying that he couldn't risk his, babyface character going down, and he couldn't, I guess, all the merchandise and everything, didn't want to lose all that. So then he pulled out on it, and therefore we got this ending, which was essentially a non-finish. I think the idea of that at the time, I would have hated it, but I think it could have worked if we connected storylines. I just want to kind of spitball here with you, booking. The way I would have done it if that would have happened is, Warrior turns heel.
Where this would end up, but go carry on.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I think, he turns heel here, and I would have linked it to the Papa Shango curse afterwards. So he joins up with these guys. I would have had him coming out with just black face paint, and others have said he wouldn't run to the ring. He'd walk to the ring, act a bit, and be really bad, be really vicious. And eventually he does turn babyface again because the curse gets removed. So you had an end to how he could be this heel, because essentially a lot of bad stuff's happened to him in the months leading up to this, but it wasn't to be. And we actually never saw a heel Warrior from this point to when he retired.
Yeah, let me go one step further. I think that could have worked only if you had Hulk Hogan coming back the following WrestleMania,
which he did.
Him in that big match. But I think,
and people are saying, and we'll talk about this, because that's one of the things people sometimes say, that was that. So I mean, this is why we talk about this period. It's so interesting what could have been, and we'll talk about all the iterations.
I don't think it makes any business sense to do it at the time, because there was no other big babyface around other than maybe Macho Man. They were still building towards Bret.
Well, we thought they were building towards Bret, but they're subject to change. But yeah, at this point, these two were the biggest babyfaces, right? I think, as you said, the Warrior turning heel here, I don't know. I don't think people would reacted well to it. We're talking about it, learning what happened later on with characters and heel turns being cool, but we're already talking about business being down in the US. It's super hot in the UK, but at this point, you're looking at the card, seeing who else fits in. But to your point, if this heel turn happens, it creates a new dynamic of who takes them on. We know Hulk Hogan will return. So yeah, it's interesting to think of what could have been, but I guess what would have been, even in the more likely scenario, was, Warrior the babyface getting his big title shot, but we know that's not going to happen either. So yeah, I'm just, it's going to be great talking about things that could have been and what was, and what was probably the most interesting year in professional wrestling, certainly from this moment on. Because another thing, Wax, before we move on, and this is crazy, right, when you think about it, this match, the Macho Man is never going to main event in a singles match again in the WWF.
Yeah, which is a shame. The way
it's incredible, isn't it?
Petered out at WWF. Yeah. We'll talk about that a lot, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. So it's incredible. I mean, this card, it really is, as you like to use the word, seminal moment, because if you're watching the show here, you could not predict what was going to happen certainly. But to top it off, I think a great match between two legends, and it was the right match for such a big event, a big show. If ended in a non-finish, but I think as you say, the tandem at the end kept people happy.
Time to move on, Fash, to the biggest gimmick in the WWF.
Kamala? Come
absolutely. It's Kamala versus Undertaker, and what could only be described as a horrible wrestling match. But if you were a kid, I think you would have enjoyed just the whole aura of the two going up against each other. Just completely different sort of get-ups. Kamala, obviously, from the deep, dark African jungle, and Undertaker from Death Valley. But I think that's what made it work so well if you were of a certain age. But obviously, now you look back at the match itself, you think
it's such a short match, isn't it? It's more of an angle than a match.
It's more of an angle.
For me, the memorable moment here, and I'm sure it's the same for you, is Undertaker's entrance. It's the hearse. At that time, that was the coolest entrance he'd done, right? And probably still, if you look at all his entrances, one of the best ones. So I think, Kamala, as you say, he's been back for a few months. Straight away, he's in a big feud with the Undertaker. Undertaker's feud with Berserker dropped. So you're thinking, and this is the first kind of big, huge guy the Warrior's going to take on. I'm sorry, the Undertaker's going to take on. But as you say, it was a nothing match, and really, it didn't help with Kamala not being very fearsome. He was just shit scared of the Undertaker.
Matches that the crowd weren't actually up for. I think maybe that goes towards the lack of action in this match, or maybe the high intensity of the previous match.
Can I just jump in there? Was this a thing that at the time, I think they were fatigued because this wasn't the next match actually for the audience. So we mentioned the Tatanka Berserker match that actually took place after Warrior against Savage. So I think by this point, they are fatigued. And in a way, it makes sense why this match was short, because then there's another epic coming after it. And I think, as you say, outside of the Undertaker's entrance and at the end part, there's not much happening here. But in terms of, the actual match they have, there's not a lot to it. I like to see the choke slam from the Undertaker, and it looks like he's going for the tombstone. And then obviously Kim Chi comes in and basically gets the disqualification. And then we see that, I'll let you talk into the next part of it, which, is why the Undertaker was so popular in terms of the post-match stuff.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, he gets hit by this extraordinary hat of Kim Chi's, must be super strength, because it completely knocks out the Undertaker. Kamala goes up top and gets a splash on the Undertaker, not a move that you would want to take off Kamala, especially off that belly. But anyway, Kamala thinks he's gotten one over the Undertaker, but that's that point the Undertaker does his typical sort of getting up from the dead
set up. But this was one of the best setups. He just timed it so well, and they had that shot of him doing it, that he comes up in the turn. It really was Undertaker at his best. At this point, he really was owning the character. We talk about 91 to here, but now he is truly the Undertaker in everything that he does.
And nobody sells fear like Kamala does as he's running away down the ring ramp, and that's the end of Kamala for now, and we know this will continue on for a wee while.
Yeah, and what you think about it, Wax, that's the thing. Here the audience was more giving, and we were giving, so you've had a count out victory. You've got a disqualification, so you're getting a lot of non-finishes here, and we go back earlier as well. With Martel and Michaels. There's a lot of matches here that actually non-finishes, but we don't really remember that because it's more about the characters and just the whole display of everything, the whole spectacle of it all.
This whole point about finishes and does disqualification, count out finish, take away from a match, something that I've always argued it doesn't or it shouldn't, but I know most wrestling fans absolutely hate when a match doesn't finish with the 1, 2, 3.
Well, this was, as you say, it's more of an angle, isn't it? This is essentially leading to the next part of the story. And I think that's what, this was, as opposed to, being the ending. We're talking about some of the matches here. It very much feels as if this a one-off, match is done, we move on. This one was actually going to continue, similar to the stuff that was happening with Savage, Warrior, and Ric Flair. So, but yeah, nothing match really, a dud, but great for the Undertaker entrance and great for the post-match shenanigans.
The big match is here, Fash. The crowd's looking forward to it. Before we get going, we've got a couple of promos coming up We've got the British Bulldog first with a message of reuniting the family, but at the same time, he is wanting to become the IC champ. We've also got a promo from Bret, a bit of a heelish promo, I would say, saying he's got the Bulldog to where he is, which he means that when he says that.
Yeah, Bret means that for sure.
And before the match even kicks off, we've actually got a very special guest. Roddy Piper is in the arena, gets a tremendous ovation, comes out to join the bagpipers who were playing, and grabs a bagpipe of his own and starts playing.
And what I loved about this, Max, was Vince McMahon was making out to be such a big moment that they're playing Scotland the Brave or whatever, not realizing this is London, England again. And why would the crowd pop for this? Now, I know there's a lot of people that, like ourselves, we believe in Britain and independence and all that kind of stuff. But it was just funny how he was making out like this was the biggest thing ever. You're in London, England, and most of the crowd's not going to care about this bagpipe show and the fact that they're playing Scotland the Brave. But once again, it was just tone deaf from Vince McMahon, and I thought it was just hilarious because the crowd loves Piper, but I don't think they really knew how to react to this show of bagpipes.
Yeah, bagpipes were a little bit off altogether because, why would you have bagpipes in London? But anyway, Piper was playing these bagpipes really well. So I went out and did some research, and it turns out that Piper did actually learn to play the bagpipes as a youngster. So he's not actually just looking good playing the bagpipes. I think he is actually genuinely playing the bagpipes, which is tremendous talent.
It was good to see. There's a great cameo and doing something different. So I did enjoy that watching again, and especially being Scots. It was great to see our fellow Scotsman, Roddy Piper, come out for a cameo and play the bagpipes. So it certainly was a big hit for me.
Yeah. Straight after this, we have a little interview with Diana Hart, who is obviously Bret's sister and married to the Bulldog. She's in the crowd. I think she's only a few seats away from the front of the ring. She's wearing this iconic brown coat that I've never forgotten.
You've been trying to buy this coat for the last 30 years, so you've still not been able to get hands on it, but maybe Diana's listening to us and she'll maybe send hers across to you.
You had this coat, Fash, from what I recall at university.
Oh, you got me. I know it was more of a Del Boy type jacket I had. If people watched the UK show Only Fools and Horses, I had one of those back in the uni days. I'm not too proud of that.
If you say so, Fash. But she's wearing this brown coat, as I've never forgotten, and it's a very iconic moment later on in the match, which again you'll see again. But anyway, she's acting very somber. She's talking about how serious this whole situation has gotten to, and actually she compares herself to a wife of someone on the front lines, which I thought was a little bit over the top. And if that was said today, you could.
I bet it's Vince McMahon. He probably put the mute on and he's like, "Say it, damn it, say it, say it."
Definitely. The interview was done by Sean Mooney. Obviously, we don't see Sean Mooney for very many years after this, but an interesting. Actually,
he sticks around until about 93, doesn't he? I think you're firing him before he does, but yeah, he was one of the iconic names alongside Lord Alfred Hayes and of course Mean Gene Okerlund. Sean Mooney, I'm sure we'll talk about him in the future. I remember at the time I never used to be that impressed with Sean Mooney compared to Mean Gene, but like anyone else, I appreciate him a bit more now.
Yeah, let's get down to the match itself. British Bulldog comes out first, and he's accompanied by Lennox Lewis.
Some jabroni called Lennox Lewis comes out with him to zero reaction, and nobody knows who he is. And is he the European champion or something? Or the Commonwealth champion? He's just a jabroni at this point.
Interestingly, exactly. This is very much a few years way too early for his big shot at the world title, which he would eventually win, and he would become a really big name throughout world boxing. But at this point, it made no sense to have Lennox Lewis of all people walking down the ring with him.
Yeah,
unless he was fishing for a contract.
I don't know. It's because I'm trying to remember the history of Lennox Lewis. Was he Olympic?
I think he was an Olympic.
Yeah, he was. I think that happened. He'd won his first title. So I guess for them, it was like, this guy. But yeah, at the time, I was like, not fussed by this at all. But in hindsight, it's quite funny because years later down the line, Vince McMahon would have loved to have had Lennox Lewis on his show. So there you go. At this point, the British Bulldog and Bret Hart are more popular than this man.
Bulldog certainly gets a tremendous ovation from the crowd. Bret comes out next, looking every inch a champion, an Intercontinental champion. Anyway, it gets a mixed reception, I would say, relative to his normal reaction. And again, that's basically because of the opponent that he's up against. Talking about championships, the IC belt looks tremendous every time you see it.
This is the best version of the IC title. I've hated every single version of it post that, and the current stuff is just rubbish, right? This for me is the Intercontinental title. The iconic belt. There was nothing like it.
And if you put this against the world title at that time, the Eagle belt, which was your favorite, Fash?
That's quite a question, Wax. You know what? I like the wing. A wing deal was amazing, but I'd probably say Intercontinental title. I always like the look of it. What about you?
I would say the Intercontinental title as well. But you know what? I really like the white version of this, the white belted.
Well, I used to love it when the Warrior used to change it all the time when he was champion. And yeah, afterwards there was the white, and Razor Ramon had a few different types, didn't he? But yeah, I just thought, yeah, the title looked really cool at the time.
Yeah. Anyway, we start the match off with both guys coming to the center of the ring, facing off. Some great mat wrestling to begin. Sharp bursts of pace, then slowed down, and they really knew what they were doing, or at least one of them really knew what they were doing. We'll come to that maybe.
We'll come to that later on. Yeah.
But some great reversals throughout this opening sort of 5 minutes, and I thought just how clean was some of the wrestling that they were doing. It was just spot on. And now, obviously, these days everybody sort of rehearses every single bit of every move, but that wasn't always the case back then. And it just, again, it's amazing to see how smooth both wrestlers were, both technicians, I would say.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is here we don't appreciate the greatness of Bret Hart, because when you're watching it then, and even maybe a few years later, you're thinking both guys are, you say, technically proficient and both sides are doing it. But it's, after this, and then you realize just how great Bret was, not just planning out stuff, but calling stuff and knowing the crowd. And you see the psychology of it building up. I mean, this is a masterclass. And really up to this point, now this is our last match. We hadn't really seen a match like this up to this point. Now it's the IC title going last. So it's not, we've seen Macho Man, Steamboat, etc. But this is last, but it was just very different. And I'll let you carry on in terms of how they build this up. It really was something special to see. So I think that back then, when I was disappointed about why is Warrior and Macho Man not last, as a kid, you were getting into this, and no matter who you were, what age you were going to get into this because it was such an amazing story.
Yeah, I mean, despite both being tremendous throughout the whole match, there was one dodgy moment in the match where Bret goes for a sort of slingshot over the top rope. He's supposed to be caught by Bulldog, but Bulldog goes the opposite way. And Bret, to stop his fall, he grabs the back of Bulldog's head and almost turns it into a horrible neck breaker, which would have been really bad for both. But they make up for it thereafter. Bret trying to wear down Bulldog in the middle of the match. And this is when Bret starts to wrestle like a heel, because he hears the audience almost boo him when he's attacking the Bulldog. He makes a couple of gestures to the crowd. He looks at them and, with that sort of heelish face that you have sometimes.
I have sometimes.
That you have sometimes. And it certainly looks like, the fans definitely know who they're going for. And Bret really is the heel of this match.
He had to be. I mean, like I said, because the British Bulldog, there's no way Bret Hart was going to come out as a babyface here or even, split the crowd. And Bret as a great appearance, and probably a bit of fun for him as well, because, as a single star, he's been a babyface and he won't be a proper heel till 1997. So I think he was enjoying this as well, playing the crowd. But yeah, he had them in the palm of his hands. And, it was a very clear distinction here that, if Bret Hart was taking on someone else, he would be getting huge cheers, but it's British Bulldog. The crowd is willing it on, and the way it's been set up with him coming out, the hype around it, the crowd is desperate for the British Bulldog to do this somehow.
And they did a tremendous job of building to a finish. Every few minutes there would be Bret would be working over Bulldog. Bulldog would almost come back, but Bret would slow him back down again in the middle of the ring. Just getting the anticipation building for the Bulldog's eventual comeback, which does come. And this match goes some 35-40 minutes, I think. And Bret even puts on the sharpshooter in unique fashion. They're both lying down, and he sort of somehow managed to get it on. One of the
he used to do that later on as well. Yeah, unique ones and he did that quite a lot after this. But that was a great thing about Bret as well. He'd find different ways of applying the sharpshooter, from this period onwards. And he say it's a great way he puts it on. And obviously, Bulldog's that big, muscly guy. So can he turn him over and can he really get it cinched in?
Yeah, and it's an interesting story that Bret tells in his book about how he came up with this idea. he was thinking about it one night and late at night, and randomly wakes up his wife and asks her to lie down on the floor so he can test it out. So Bret, obviously a very serious guy when it comes to the art of wrestling, goes to any length to put on a good show. But anyway, he has the sharpshooter on tight. But Bulldog does break out of it, and I think the announcers make a point of saying it's the first person to have broken out the sharpshooter, first person to have done that. And that sort of leads up to, and actually before that, I even mentioned there's a power slam.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. The Bulldog, and the same reaction is no one's ever kicked out of the power slam. So they're really, and this is before false finishes, right? Now everybody kicks everybody, everyone's main move and finisher. And it's been a problem in the last 10 years or more. But here it never really happened. And that's why it was few and far between the instances. But yeah, as you say, Bulldog goes for the power slam. The crowd thinks that's it. Bret kicks out, and then afterwards, you see the sharpshooter situation.
Yeah, there's even a top rope suplex, which again was very rare back in the day from Bret, and that doesn't get the job done either. We talked about the sharpshooter and the Bulldog getting out of it. And towards the very, very end, we've got a sunset flip by Bret. But the Bulldog, instead of going down, he sits down using the legs of Bret and gets the pin. It sort of comes out of nowhere, but it is one of the loudest cheers I think I've ever heard.
And I remember at a time, Wax, and even I want to watch it a pop because it was such a unique finish. I say it's abrupt, but it's just brilliant because how he just captures them and pins them. It was such a unique way of doing it, and it really Bret Hart. Someone said at WrestleMania 8 had shown as a finisher when Roddy Piper had him in the sleeper hold and he kicked the turnbuckles and pinned him. Well, here it happened to Bret where he's going for, as you say, the sunset flip, gets caught, Bulldog pins him down, 1, 2, 3. The crowd erupts, and the local man, Britain's own British Bulldog, is now the Intercontinental Champion of the world. I mean, we're not doing, because our job is not to do play-by-play when we do these kind of shows, for podcast specials, yes, but the point is, we couldn't do this justice, how great it is. And an example of it is, Wax, I've got this memory. So in 1987, I went to Pakistan to see my family. And just at that time, I'd try and get wrestling VHS and show them. And there was a local provider that had them, but it was all random stuff. And there was one paper that was just 1990 to about 1992, a lot of Bret Hart stuff in it. And the last match on this VHS was this match. And we were all watching around the room, Ray, and I said, you need to watch this. And everyone was involved, from the youngest person to the oldest person, watched this match and were so engrossed. And that's, you don't need to know the language, you don't need to understand the commentary. All I explained to them was, this guy's sister is married to that guy, so it's a family thing. And they were then looking at Diana in the crowd, because remember, there's various shots of Diana throughout this match looking concerned, and they were so into it. And that's the story. And that's when professional wrestling is at its best. At the end, when Bulldog wins, there was a pop, I remember, and then obviously the next bit that you're going to talk about in the ring. But they loved it, and that was a great kind of sample example, if I'd like to rhyme that way, that it just engrossed people. And that's what Bret Hart was so great at doing, and this match is such a great example of it.
Yeah, I think it's an example of, you don't have to always finish a match by using somebody's finisher, then have to ruin a match by doing a count out finish or disqualification. You can have a pin attempt coming out of nowhere. It doesn't have to be a small package, which is the sort of go-to these days.
Even in the past, wasn't it? The small package was the abrupt ending, as opposed to this kind of unique stuff.
Yeah, and you just need somebody with a bit of a brain, to think of something a bit different. It does work. The crowds do buy it, and I think it really does help. It helps continue a feud, not necessarily end a feud, but it helps continue a feud, which is really good. We talk about the end of the match. Incredible performance from both. Bret initially turns his back, but when the Bulldog turns around to him one more time, they shake hands. In comes Diana, crying her eyes out, as if somebody's died. Joins.
You can have cry. I'm not really an emotional guy, Wax, as you know, but in this case, you got to give it to her. I thought her acting's been pretty bad. You've been saying she deserves an Oscar, but I thought here the emotion was justified. Man, it's her brother against her husband. What do you want her to do?
Fair enough, but she could be happy. She could
Well, I could be
smile.
happy tears. She was emotional about the situation. It was, I thought it was fine. I mean, it's not like when we used to wrestle back in, in the backyard and on beds and things and anywhere else. We'd fight in your lobby and I'd beat you every single time and you'd cry, but there was different tears. There were tears of, losing and never being able to beat the best. In this case, it was just emotion.
Yeah, at least that iconic picture of Diana in the middle holding up both men's hands, looking out into the audience, and even Bobby Heenan is impressed. He goes, "What a family!"
Is what a family is has multiple meanings, I think, about them, fighting, and now they're all hugging and all this kind of stuff. And we get a firework display as well to really, put a full stop on everything. And the crowd can't be happier. Right? It was the perfect ending to a perfect match, Wax. 5 out of 5. We're not rating anything, but if there's a 5-star match, this is a 5-star match.
I don't think it's a match that any competitor today could put on the way they did it. Today, they would just want to rush through it, as many high spots as possible. They did it in traditional wrestling fashion.
Bret Hart was Bret Hart. But the thing is, right, I'm going to ask you a question. Is this the greatest singles match in SummerSlam history?
Oh, you put me
that's a big history. But is it the greatest?
From a technical point of view, I think it is probably the greatest. I don't think you see other matches like this. Maybe for drama and entertainment, you do get some later on, which potentially.
But nothing's coming to your mind, is it? Nothing's coming to your mind.
But this is the one that we grew up watching. This is
I think I'll say it, and we loved the next era that's going to come in terms of Attitude Era and the hottest shows. But I'm going to say pure wrestling match. This is the greatest wrestling match in SummerSlam history. I'll go out and say that. And keen to hear, drop us a line if you disagree. What do you think was better than this? But as you say, we're still talking about it nearly 30 years later, Wax. And who would have thought that this would really be? We've talked about Bret Hart, SummerSlam 91, Mr. Perfect, WrestleMania 8, Roddy Piper. But I think this was the true coming out party in terms of showing that I'm on last here. And I've really just ripped it to shreds, and I'm something special. And I keep talking about Bret, Wax, and I'm not talking about our own British Bulldog. And there's later I realize why, and there's a rationale behind why I'm just talking about Bret and not the Bulldog here.
Well, let me set the stage. Obviously, we got Bret's book come out, several years ago now. We both read that with, I think, amazement, because it was such a honest.
It was a brilliant book as well. Yeah.
Down exactly what he's been through in his career. But anyway, he talks about the build-up to the match first, and how the Bulldog was absent from shows because of a leg injury. And actually, if you go back and notice, Bret does a couple of matches, but Bulldog isn't actually on the shows. Instead of it's just promos. He claims that Bulldog's been ignoring his calls in the run-up to the match. When he eventually confronts him in England, Bulldog lets out that how high he's been getting for the last month, consistently, constantly, with nobody else but Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Both of them getting
that
together.
Anvil.
That Anvil. This is all in Bret's book,
Yeah, and Anvil's not even in the company, right? He's been let go because of his problems, but he's still causing some chaos. And I'll let you carry on with that, but it's very disappointing stuff.
The moment that really stands out, obviously, is when the match begins, and within the first few minutes, the iconic quote, "Bret, I'm fucked," and I'm sure somebody could do that Wigan accent better than me. But
I thought that was pretty good.
Anyway, he was literally out on his feet because his cardio wasn't up to scratch.
He forgot the match. He basically forgot the match
plan, which would be laid out beforehand. Bret goes, during the match, I went up like a feather. He went up like a full refrigerator. Bret considers the total outcome of this match to be his best match ever, because he had to carry the Bulldog through the match.
And we know that Bret loves himself, right? So if Bret Hart was ice cream, he'd eat himself. But the thing is, I've never really seen Bulldog after this point really dispute what happened. Obviously, it was in Bret's book explicitly later on. But I mean, you couldn't tell. I say there's a couple of moments there similar to what we were seeing with our Hawk earlier in the day, who was also fucked. That you can now see it, but at the time, you thought both of these guys were on it. and it was definitely a partnership to get this match over the line, and you couldn't make it out. But I say Bulldog, big guy, cardio not there where it should be. His cardio was way better afterwards when he kind of toned down a little bit. But according to Bret, yeah, he'd forgotten the match. So this makes it even more impressive that one guy carried it to this level. And I think that's probably, once again, Vince McMahon's going to have a lot of considerations in the coming weeks and months. And I think the way Bret carried himself and how he delivered this goes a long way to the decisions that are going to be made. But yeah, at the time, and even a little time after this, you didn't have a clue what was going on. And yeah, we'll take Bret's word for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give Bulldog some credit. I mean, even executing it without remembering half.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you can tell the ending part. It was all you couldn't tell. You couldn't tell. I would say there were a few moments, like you say, maybe missing a spot here and there, but it's not really visible.
A truly memorable match to end what I thought was a truly memorable pay-per-view, especially for us in the UK, and especially for us watching in that era. I don't think you would disagree, Fash.
Absolutely not. I mean, as you say, going through this card, we did see some stuff that wasn't impressive, but I think, as we keep saying, the presentation made it, and I still enjoyed watching this. It's certainly a 2-match card, and some might even argue it's a 1-match card. I think that's a bit harsh. I think definitely, Warrior Macho Man delivered in this match. As I say, I think it's a 5-star match. So those 2 matches people still talk about, but it was everything else from the Road Warriors, the LOD, coming out on the motorbikes, Undertaker with the hearse, the comedy of Shawn Michaels and Martel and Sherry, and just the appearances of all these kind of vibrant characters. And this is going to be a footnote, Wax, because you'd go, as we keep saying, you move from this event to the next one, and there's going to be a lot of changes. A lot of people we're not going to see, and some characters are going to go away, and other big changes are going to happen. So it's a fascinating period. I really think this is the last show of what is the golden era of that time, and we just didn't know at the time that this was it. So in a way, with all the things that are going to come, what a way to go out in terms of that golden era, to do it in front of 80,000 people at Wembley Stadium. I know you said this figure's not been disputed. I've seen a few people dispute it on Twitter recently, but we'll go with the fact that it was 88,000 Wembley Stadium. And at this moment, you leave this show and you think the British Bulldog is going to be huge for years. And there's a story behind that. The British Bulldog's not even going to be at the next pay-per-view. So this moment is all about the Bulldog, and you're thinking the rocket's been strapped on him. He's going to go and, be one of the biggest stars in the company. But yeah, this is why the show is so fascinating, because this is it. Really, does the British Bulldog have a bigger moment than this in his career, Wax? He's obviously going to go away, come back in 94. He's going to have a really strong run. Then he goes to WCW for a bit, comes back. But is this the greatest moment in the Bulldog's career?
Definitely, as a singles competitor, definitely this is the highlight. But it shouldn't have been, as you noted.
It shouldn't have been.
It shouldn't have been. He should have gotten so much more over the next 5 years. But it was actually Bret, and we'll talk about his rise over the next few episodes. We spent so long building up to this particular event, SummerSlam 92, Absolutely. So long working on this particular period, that I've completely forgotten what happens next. So I'm going to have to go watch back to Superstars and Wrestling Challenge and catch up ahead of our next show, which I'm sure will be very soon. But yeah, I hope you enjoy this 2-part SummerSlam review. I really enjoyed doing it. It's definitely one of my favorite events of all time. And I think anybody who watched it live or, even watches it back today will definitely agree it stands the test of time.
Absolutely. And like we said in the last episode, part 1, maybe the UK gets another SummerSlam next year on the 30th anniversary. We'll wait and watch and see what happens there. But yep, in our next episode, we will now look at the era post SummerSlam 1992. And yeah, things are changing in the coming weeks and months. We'll also cover what's happening in present professional wrestling. We need to do some of those Wrestling with Present shows, Wax. We're trying to find some time, trying to just manage everything on our side. So yeah, look out for more shows. If you've not seen the story up to now, check out our previous shows on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. We have covered everything really from mid-1991 to this point in meticulous detail behind the scenes and what we saw in front of our eyes. So we'll continue to do that. As ever, give us your feedback. Check us on Instagram, Twitter. Wax is saying a lot of crazy things on Twitter. He's the one that runs that one. I can't say I always agree with his opinions, but definitely, yeah, just interact with us, check it out. And We hope you're enjoying this. As ever, take care of yourselves and keep wrestling with those memories.